on to Caroline, who's going to share a spoken word with us, and we can listen to Daniel a bit later. Caroline?
I will just share a short spoken word piece with you all, and then I'll be out of your way. When the waves come and crash into your rain-riddled boat, when life gets rough and it gets harder and harder to stay afloat, when you realize that all that glitters isn't gold, understand this: it's not the end of the world. When your vision is clouded with tears and you can't see your way out, if you're questioning yourself or having doubts and your feet feel like they're on shaky ground, hear me out. It gets better. I know because I've been there. I've had and still have days when I feel pressed and crushed. Days when my mind feels unsound, days when my soul feels cast down, but I'm learning. I'm learning to look out for myself. Learning to do the healing work. Understanding that I am not alone. So here are a few things I'd like for you to remember. 1, you're not alone. 2, everyone deals with mental health, but remember that you can't do it by yourself. And 3, it's okay to seek help. Yes, prayer works, but therapy works too. And it doesn't have to be one or the other, so why not combine the two? Plus, your spiritual leader probably isn't a therapist. And in the same ways doctors treat physical illnesses, your mental health is best addressed by a mental health specialist. So remember, physical solutions don't resolve psychological troubles. Remember you are loved. Remember you are valued. Remember you are needed. So on your bad days, speak to someone. On your worst days, remind yourself that the morning will come and it will bring with it a song that you can sing through the storm. Thank you.
I would like to hand you over and welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Rosina Aline, a Shadow Minister of Mental Health, MP for Tooting, and an A&E doctor, who has very kindly accepted our invitation to be here with us tonight. Dr. Rosina, thank you so much. Over to you.
Yes, I'm Rosina Aline Khan. I am the MP for Tooting. I am an A&E doctor, but I'm also a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Started as a co-scholar, for those of you that know what that is, and I made so many friends for life through initiatives of change. And over time, you know, it's often when life gets crazy and you live in all different countries and then you have your own family and things just get busy, you feel as though you kind of like lose your way and you lose touch. And then went back to work on the front line. I mean, I never stopped being a doctor. I'd always continued my shifts, but I went back to work on the front line throughout this COVID pandemic, doing more shifts than ever. And for me, it was very alarming early on that this virus was stripping the humanity out of grieving. And one of the things that was so hard and so different for people working in the COVID environment that was a frontline health worker was that you were not able to deal with people as they were grieving the most for the ones they loved the most in this world. And it's very hard because obviously politically we are designed in this world to challenge each other and to call out where we think things have gone wrong just for the sake of scoring political points. And I've never been that kind of politician. I've always been issues-based, you know. And one of the things I learned on the Co-Scholars program is that you always have to understand your own personal bias and where that comes from. But I think it is important when you hold any political position, any position within your community, any position within your church or your mosques or your temples, to be able to talk out about things when you see that change needs to come, when things could have been done better. And unfortunately, what I saw from our front line, what I experienced hearing from people all around the country that wrote to me, that phoned me, that contacted me, that tweeted me, that insted me, was that this government had made a lot of mistakes in their handling. And now over time, it became more and more obvious that information was sat on that could have saved lives. Now, understanding that and understanding that the government knew that we should have gone into lockdown sooner, that we should have, they should have acted upon the information that they knew that our BAME communities were more vulnerable. The fact that people should have had the PPE that they needed to keep them safe. All of these things meant that more deaths than necessary occurred. And as a frontline worker, the thing that was so hard was that normally, if you are breaking bad news to a grieving family, you're able to do it in person. People are able to say goodbye to people that they love the most. But this didn't happen with the case of COVID. This was brutal. And for those working on the front line, it was petrifying. We were coming home every day to our own families, fearful that we were passing it on to them. People, like so many people that work in our health and care service live in multi-occupancy homes. They don't have the ability to wash in a separate bathroom and keep all their things separate from the rest of their family. There are multi-generational homes, people living together, many people coming from quite poor backgrounds, just serving our communities in many different ways. And the mental health of people started to be eroded very early on, actually. And the pressure upon you to be everything to someone that is dying, to be the only person they interact with on a daily, to pass messages from their loved ones to them, desperate messages, it takes its toll. And so a lot of frontline workers really, really, really struggled with their mental health. And on top of that, they lost colleagues, they lost friends, and they lost their own families. The whole Black Lives Matter movement, we have to come together regardless of our background, regardless of our ethnicity, because this is everybody's problem. And when we look at people who experience adverse childhood experiences which go on to lead to mental ill health, they are disproportionately from poor socioeconomic backgrounds and from BAME backgrounds. What protections need to be in place for people to feel as though they are safeguarded and they can safeguard their families? So I worked with Hope in the Cities through Initiatives of Change. People have died unnecessarily as a result of inequality. But people were dying as a result of inequality before any of this happened, and they will continue to die of inequality. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we know that people from certain backgrounds are disproportionately affected, their life chances, they don't have the same life chances. And we have to challenge that respectfully. Like the suicide rate in young men is going up. Access to services for people from minority ethnic groups, how they access services, the stigma attached. Listen, we all know, let's speak with honesty. How many young Asian people can go to their mum and dad and say, I don't feel well in the head. I feel a bit depressed. It's not something that we can talk about freely if we're really honest about it. We can't. Right now, if you are a young person and you are struggling, you go on some waiting list for a year, 18 months, and by the time you see someone, it's too late. And then if you hit 18 when you're in the middle of your treatment, you automatically drop off and the services aren't available for you. So
Marcus Wilks, who is a business entrepreneur, a volunteer at church who inspires young people to achieve the goals and aspirations. Guys, I could speak about Marcus all day long, but I'm going to let him tell you his story and you can hear from him. Over to you, Marcus.
First and foremost, I want to say I'm privileged to be in a position to speak because, when you have a story to share, I think it's valuable. It's valuable because it's your story. And it's also valuable because I think other people can benefit from that. But one thing you might not have heard is my story. And I don't share my story very often because I feel that my story is very personal to me. And it's something that I'm still mulling over. Something where you class as middle-aged. And I've learned a lot and I'm still learning. So my story starts at senior school. So when I was at school, in junior school, I found it very, very difficult to focus and concentrate. That was my biggest thing. And I think that focus really hit home because I was having probably issues going off at home with the family, which I'm not going to talk about too much here. But that carried on through my life. I moved to many different schools just because we moved homes. And when I got to my senior school, the last school that I moved to when I was in year 2, I realized that I wasn't very clever. I realized I wasn't in none of the sets, the top sets, because at that time you had set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And because of my lack of concentration, my lack of focus, my lack of engagement, not because I didn't have the ability to learn, because I was in a position where my thoughts were elsewhere. They wasn't in the classroom. So I was automatically put down to the bottom set. So I should be having an opportunity to learn just like some of the other people in the higher sets. However, that took me to a place where I was coming to leave school and I was 16, and you get your options. So we had a careers advisor that would come around and say, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? So anyway, I was pushed into a corner, and it was either going to be a fireman or a joiner. So toss of a coin, fireman, joiner. Okay, let's go down the joiner route. So then I had an apprenticeship at a place called Henry Boot. I did seem enthusiastic about it because I learned, and I thought, you know what, this could be me. I could be a joiner. Let me give my opportunity to this. Back in the late 90s, the first thing I experienced was racism. Again, the building site was predominantly of a white British background, English background, Scottish background, and I felt myself very isolated, and I couldn't see again, how do I fit into this? Qualified at my training program for level 2 joinery, and I said to them, do you know what, this is not for me. Like, I don't fit in here. This is not what I want to do. And then I kind of stumbled for like 6 months. My mum was like, Marcus, what are you going to do? You can't just stay at home. You need to do something. But I chose to go and work at an embroidery factory. It was a really basic factory, and I worked there for 6 months to keep my mind occupied. And like, I don't know if you've been in the town centre when somebody stops you and says, how are you doing? What gas and electric company you're on? Do you want to change your supply? Or somebody might have stopped you and says, oh, you can win a holiday. Whatever it was, I was that guy. And when I did that, I found some kind of connection with that. I thought, well, I could really stop a complete stranger, hold good conversation, and not only that, get them to change their mind about their supply. So I ended up doing that job for about 6 years. I was like, wow, all this college, all this apprenticeship, I was making really good money back then. And sooner did I know that I still wasn't fulfilled. There was still something missing in me. Even though I connected with speaking to people and doing sales, there was something still missing. I traveled. Bearing in mind, I never went on a plane in my life. So we wasn't privileged of going on holidays, going on airplanes when I was younger. I was never privileged. Went down to the coast a few times. But then I thought, I want to explore some point in the world. So I got a passport and I went to Thailand. I went to New York. I went to Dubai, I went to Greece, I went to so many different countries. And when I come back, that part of what was missing was my relationship with God. And I made a serious commitment to connect. And I said, God, you know what, whatever is missing in my life, I want to connect with you first and foremost, and then you can take me in the steps. And then while I was at the church, I started to do volunteering with young people. So it was like a young person's evenings on a Wednesday, on a Sunday, where we used to do a Sunday school. Years. The truth is that who knows what they want to be at 16? I think it's very unrealistic. Who knows what they want to be at 20? One day I was watching a program on TV, and it was about young people, young Black people in the community, in gangs. And when I watched this documentary, it literally brought tears to my eyes because of the suffering that young Black people were going through with gangs killing each other, going through a situation where they had no harmony, even though they could see each other within each other. And we managed to reach out to hundreds of young people in Nottingham. We managed to work with 2 young people in St Anne's, Meadows, Radford, all the areas that they had gang affiliations with each other. And we did a 6-month program, which helped them to gain work experience. Some of them didn't even have a driving license, passports, and we took them all the way to Scotland from different areas, and to be able to sit down for 3 days and talk about social issues that affect them both. And 7 or 8 years, I've been working with young people for support living, and I found that we've made some great changes, some great work with young people. And now at 40, I would never change anything. I'll never change my life where it is today, because through that experience, I've become who I know I wanted to be. And that is working with young people, making a difference and being passionate about what I really want to do.
I was pretty much written off. I was born at a time, like Marcus, I used some fine face cream, where we look younger than we are, and I'm very same age, but and in the 80s, growing up in the 80s, not only was some of the music a little bit questionable, if I'm honest, but it was very unusual to see mixed race children. When it came to doing my A-levels, stuff went really wrong. And I didn't even show up to some of my exams, and I failed on my A-levels. So I was 18 years old, no A-levels, labelled a complete failure by my school, told basically that I may as well forget about any dreams I ever had. And I was told not to bother applying to medical school anyway, because we just didn't have the money, and I may as well just know my place. And a year later, I got into Cambridge Medical School and got myself a Cambridge degree, having been a write-off, having failed on my A-levels, right into medical school saying, this is me, I'm really enthusiastic. They were like, no, listen. And I basically decided that I wanted to commit my life towards like humanitarianism, and that the sound of a parent losing a child was an international language, and I couldn't hear any more of it. It was too painful, and I went to Palestine. I went and called out the Rohingya Genocide. I traveled. I've done like 5 or 6 different missions, even while being an MP, because I realised the power of the platform. And I also, through that, have done so much work, including like my documentary that I've been working on. So I try to use my experiences of being told that I could never make it, I will never amount to anything, to empower others that have been told the same thing, to say, don't let anyone else's limitations be yours. The only limits you place on yourself, like the only limits in your life are the ones you place on yourself. So just don't place limits on yourself, and your life is limitless.
Okay, Desi, and I work in the NHS at the moment, and I've got my own consultancy business. But one of the things that I'm really sort of taken aback by from listening to you all is how everything you're saying really resonates with the work that I'm doing in the NHS, and resonates in terms of how BAME communities and BAME individuals working in the NHS have been excluded. And it goes back to what Rosina was saying about working in A&E, been dealing with COVID for the past, since March, really, and dealing with the planning of it.
I first and foremost, I think people need to outreach. Go out and speak to these people. Go out and not be a stranger, not be an outcast, and try and find out what the local needs are. And it could be as simple as something like they just don't have people to talk to, or they don't have the platform to speak on. So I think first and foremost is the problem that we have. People do not outreach or reach out to people. I think that's probably the starting point.
As a key member of Initiative for Change, being able to facilitate this important dialogue. What we are doing at the moment is scratching the surface to really engage, inspire and empower all of you, including the contributors in this important gathering. As Adil has highlighted at the beginning, Muslim who grew up in this country, coming from Yemen, it's just been such a delight to be part of a movement that really believes in change. And next we have our speaker who goes under the name of H. He was currently in his 2nd year at university studying pharmacy. He's been very much influenced by the grime music.
Hi, my name's H. I'm currently 19 and studying my 2nd year pharmacy.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what is like in this current climate with COVID happening, the Black Lives Matters, and being a 19-year-old young man grappling with the challenges of not just in current society, but also the challenges of being a 19-year-old man. What is that like, and how does that affect you as a young person?
As a young person, being 19, most of the people our age do use social media, and they get to see a lot of what's going on in other people's lives, and we get to see news broadcasted that way, so we try to be like them. For most people our age, they look up to footballers and rappers that's what they see nowadays, and they don't have really anything else to look up to. As if as a rapper, they will do certain parts of what they're doing, not understanding why they've done it, and they'll do it just to look cool, to make themselves.
So you mentioned about looking up to individuals. Who do you look up to? Who are your greatest influences?
Nowadays, since it'll be the people I hang with every day, like Adil and his family and everything like that, and Marcus Wilks as well, as it shows to you that you don't have to go on the wrong path to to make it, and you can see
What impact do they have on your life in terms of your future aspiration and dreams? Because
they're always supporting, but they also put your dreams into a reality. So
about your social circle, what impacts them and what other kind of support that is available for them to change?
For our social circle, most of people my age wear certain clothes, and from that they're stereotyped to be something they're not. For like example, say if me and my boys were just out wearing trackies or tracksuits, and maybe a couple of us are on a bike, anyone walking by would think of us of being or doing something wrong. They're gonna end up starting acting that way because of the way you treat them. Just that the older generation need to understand that just because you're wearing something or doing something doesn't mean we're actually doing something wrong.
What it is that you love so much about grime music? How do you connect with it?
Like I said, that most kids nowadays, all they have to look up to is footballers and rappers, and grime and drum music just is one of the couple of music genres that end up blowing up in the UK. Say if you listen to drum music and you actually like listening to what they're saying, it says that most of them involve people who end up hurting each other or something like that, or robbing or something like that. And the thing is, the kids that listen to this and don't understand what's going on need to understand that the people that are doing this, the people that were actually rapping about this, they've come from, like say from London, they've come from estates where drug dealing and this stuff was happening on their front door. Other people wearing nice clothes or £600 shoes, and then they want to be like them, and then they go start doing stuff like selling drugs or just robbing people just because they want to wear the shoes even though they don't need to, and they just want to be like someone else. And
the education that young people need today far exceeds beyond what the national curriculum is currently offering to young people.
Just say a little bit about my work that we've been doing and some of the projects that I've been lucky enough to be involved in, and also maybe touch a bit on mental health issues and things like that. So some of the work that I have been working with the young people to do is just looking at developing those skills that aren't necessarily taught in school. No one knows at 16, no one knows at 18, no one knows at 25 or 30 exactly what they're going to do. And, you know, just the statistics tell us that there's a lot that has gone on this year, and maybe it's given people an opportunity to pause and actually think what is actually important, looking at the importance of community. And while working with young people, some of the projects that we have actually had the privilege of being involved in just show very clearly how important it is to work together to support each other, because I'm not an expert in everything. You know, I might have ideas, but then someone else will be able to help me propel it to do the better thing. Various tools to be able to say, okay, this has happened. Okay, I'm pausing. I need to process this, and having an understanding of how to process those things. So it's looking at, you know, doing those things that you love to do, you know, getting out. Like if it's loving to paint, then that's great. Do that. If you want to take the spotlight off yourself, you know, do something for someone else, because I believe that a lot of one of the reasons that, you know, sometimes we can find things so tough is because we are trying to process things in our minds on our own. And
so I was in Marcus' group along with the other colleagues. And one of the things we raised about the challenges that we face, so as someone who works on grassroots level, is funding. We find it really difficult. We've got people that are really passionate to work with young people. However, the funding is just not available. And one of the ways that we thought to rise above those challenges was through partnerships and collaborating and stuff, to exchange like expertise amongst organizations that work with young people, so that it's not as costly, because as we are all aware, all these programs and all the support and stuff, it requires resources. So that was one of the points that we raised.
What we were looking at is some of the challenges, in particular with mental health, particularly within the current pandemic. And one of the things that I was talking about is some of the work I've recently been doing with a charity called the Good Things Foundation, who focus on people who are being digitally excluded. There's going to be a lot of people that can't go out, they're excluded from going out, don't have any connection with anybody else. So as a result of that, the mental health is going to be massively deteriorating. The one thing that we've touched upon in quite particular is the education side of it as well. One thing that H mentioned about having particular role models, but educating people correctly and being able to kind of go down the right path in terms of being able to help them to then help others. A couple of different things that we touched upon about what you could potentially do. So me and my team at work have helped with the donations of certain pieces of technology, whether it's laptops, mobile phones, tablets, with their root up, because they're leaving their 90s. Not particularly tech savvy, but it's going to be, again, a massive thing. And obviously with lockdown being as hard as it has been, for them to stay connected to the rest of their family is going to be massive for them because they can't go outside otherwise.
The individual was doing their own counselling course or learning about counselling. So there was sort of almost, and excuse me if I get this completely wrong, but a sort of self-realisation about what the individual needs, and also how to deal with somebody remotely and I suppose manage boundaries, people that haven't been able to get hold of those services through COVID. So they're now beginning to get them in. And of course, that has raised a lot of issues around BME communities and also big on the mental health issues that people have held back, and mental health anguish carries on up. That was deemed to be a Cinderella service, and interesting, and Rosina can't defend this statement, but it kind of sounded as though there was some descriptions of early, and forgive me if I use the word disadvantage, but Rosina talked about single parent mum bringing her up, not doing well at school. Marcus described some difficulties perhaps at school, and therefore the prediction of what that youngster is going to be kind of almost puts them on a path that the system says that is what you will become, and broken homes where they don't have a strong male role model. And it's just interesting to think, particularly in Marcus's case, where the journey changed and he met somebody at his church that gave him a kind of change of direction. But I think one quite significant opportunity is just to allow young people to have much more coaching and mentoring from an independent person.
I just wanted to point out the campaign that Initiatives of Change is running, and it's about making small changes in our lives, meaning, hopefully making a ripple effect where we can make big changes together. It's called Take One Step, and the idea is that we're asking everyone to make a pledge, whether it's, anything from, growing your own vegetables to, pledging that you're going to take time out every day for 5 minutes in silence, for instance, or helping your elderly neighbour.
Abil said, today it's all, what did she say? That's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Marcus said he didn't try to fit in because he knew he couldn't, even if he tried to. He who considers the poor, that is the weak, the helpless, and economically poor, is a broad measure of the righteous man or woman. He who considers the poor helps those who will likely not help him in return. He who considers the poor is kind to those in need. He who considers the poor has a generous heart. He who considers the poor gives for their good, not simply to make himself feel good. Considers implies giving careful thought to this person's situation rather than perfunctory help, rather than on the surface help. So I think Marcus has really indicated the key, that we just don't believe that there's any restriction to our going out there and personally connecting with as many people as we can